Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 540, the Darjeeling Limited, directed by Wes Anderson, 2007. By the way, this would be the last time I talk about Wes Anderson in this. Okay, basic plot summary, very basic. Three brothers, they meet in a train called the Darjeeling Limited, and they engage in this journey of spiritual discovery, which is actually planned out in advance by one of them. You have this itinerary about, oh, okay, we're going to do this, and the goal is to have a spiritual reawakening. But over the course of the film, it both doesn't go to plan at all, but at the same time, it also fulfills what the intent of the plan was all about. So it's this notion of, in that sense, it's very similar to Bottle Rocket, where you have, and again, it's the same. It's the same, and the characters in both are played by Owen Wilson. What is it with him and being associated with planning things? But anyways, one of the takeaways is that there's a difference between planning something and then actually living in the moment, and it's it's not the destination. It's not so much the destination; it's the journey, and it's not how you get there. It's just that you try to get there. So, and a lot of other come to terms with one's past, and it's healing relationships, and various other themes and ideas that Wes Anderson is known for, and all done in his very recognizable style. As I've said before, I think of his films as being like illustrated children's books for adults, where all the characters are dealing with adult things, but it looks and is presented in a way that feels like as if it were a book that had just won the Caldecott Medal. But given that this is the last time I'm going to talk about Wes Anderson, I think, as I've said before in more recent episodes, I mean, there are certain films that I like, and there are certain directors, and there are certainly certain directors that I like, and Wes Anderson is certainly one of them. I've liked him since I first saw Rushmore, and I've continued to pursue his films since then. Interestingly, with this one, I was holding off on the Darjeeling Limited because I had learned at that point, when it first came out in theaters, to wait for the Criterion edition. That at some point it's going to get released on Criterion. I didn't have a whole lot of chances to see it in the theaters. If I did, I would have. But as far as home viewing, I wanted to wait until the Criterion edition. In fact, this is why that I haven't, even though I have seen both Fantastic Mr. Fox and Moonrise Kingdom, that's why I'm holding off on both of them, because I'm pretty sure at some point they're gonna be featured on the Criterion Collection, or maybe not, just because he has a different he's had different producers and different distributors behind it, so it's all a matter of licensing and permission and so forth. I'm sure it will happen at some point, but that's why I'm holding off on that. So I didn't get Darjeeling Limited until much later, and even didn't get it when it first came out on DVD on DVD through Criterion. I think I waited a couple years because again, I do all these things in piecemeal. Because I'm talking about 150 different titles, there's a lot of ground that I've already established and then continue to establish, so it wasn't as big of a priority, but I knew at some point I wanted to do it, and sure enough, and suddenly the right opportunity was there, and I got it. In fact, the only thing that I saw that I did see that was connected to the Darjeeling Limited was the short film Hotel Chevalier, which was available as a free download through iTunes for a spell, and it was meant as the prologue to the Darjeeling Limited because it gives a little bit of backstory on one of the brothers. He, played by Jason Schwartzman, he spends all of his time in this particular hotel room, and his ex-girlfriend, played by Natalie Portman, comes in and visits him. They spend the night together, and this is supposed to be before he goes to India and meets with the story. So it serves as a prologue. It was shown with the festival screenings, and then it was shown with the film in festival screenings, but then it got taken out when it was in its limited theatrical release, and now finally it's put back into the film, and you have the option of either just watching the Darjeeling Limited or watching Hotel Chevalier and then Darjeeling Limited, and that's actually how I prefer to do it. I like watching both because you do kind of they both stand on their own, but they also fit very well together. So anyway, so that was my so that's when I finally got into the Darjeeling Limited. And as I said before, there's been a warm up. I anticipated a warm up for Wes Anderson, given the past experience of The Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic. That I thought that it was going to be one of those ones that I may not like at first, but then would probably like more on the second viewing. And by the time I got into the Darjeeling Limited, I did see Fantastic Mr. Fox, and this is before I saw Moonrise Kingdom, but now I warm up to it more easily. And I don't know exactly. I think a lot of it has to do with my own cinematic sensibility has improved since seeing Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic for the first time. So I'm able to get more right away. And also I think Wes Anderson at this point it's very clear who he is and what he does cinematically. And so you go into it expecting certain things. And you also know that there are going to be some things that are played out slightly differently. There's going to be emphasis on certain aspects that you didn't get in the last film, which I think is probably worth mentioning because Wes Anderson is one of those directors that is that people love to hate for all kinds of reasons. You know, he has that quirky style, and he inspires other films that try to do the same thing but do a bad job, and what's with this particular. What's with that look? What's with all the use of music and the way that he does? What's with all the characters that probably sound more wittier than they should be, and whatever laundry list of complaints people have. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When it comes down to a film, you either like it or you don't. A film will either speak to you or it doesn't, and I make no apologies for the films that I like. If I like a film, it's because there's something about the film that speaks to me. I can empathize with the characters. I'm engaged by the story. I like the look. I like how everything plays together. It's very pleasing. It comes down to an emotional response that's informed by personality and experience. And that's really what it comes down to as far as liking a film or not liking a film. Given my own personality, given my own interests, given my own tastes and experiences and things that interest me, I like Wes Anderson among many filmmakers and certainly among many other films. And again, I don't make any apologies for this. And as far as the whole, and I think another thing that's often complained is like he just keeps doing the same film over and over again. His film is like Rushmore done over and over again, or whatever film it is. And yes, there is a consistency. There are things that Wes Anderson, I think, is always going to do until he decides to not make films anymore or until he's dead. But that, to me, is what makes Wes Anderson. And I don't expect him to do anything less than that. I think he is somebody who has his way of doing things. He likes what he does, and he's going to keep doing it. But I also see him as somebody that wants to challenge himself in particular ways. It's just, I guess what people are waiting for is some kind of big radical transformation where he just does something completely different. But I think that's not the way that Wes Anderson works. He does everything pretty slowly and gradually. It's based on circumstances, on availability, on what he's able to do, what he would like to do at a certain time. I mean, for instance, this goes back to The Life Aquatic. In one of the featurettes in The Life Aquatic, you have an interview with Mark Mothersbaugh, who has done the music to almost all of his films. The only ones he didn't do were for Moonrise Kingdom and Fantastic. I don't think he did it for Fantastic Mr. Fox. I don't remember if he did it for Darjeeling Limited or not. Although the music there was owed a lot more to Sevat Ray and so forth. And by the way, he was cited as a major influence of this film. That and Jean Renoir, particularly The River, and Merchant Ivory films were another big influence on this particular film. Anyways, so in talking with Mark Mothersbaugh, he noticed that in the beginning of their collaboration, and he worked with him since Bottle Rocket, he noticed that Wes was very hesitant to use brass. Like he just did not like that sound. And when it came to Rushmore, the musical reference he used was Vivaldi, and so it had a sort of a chamber music feel to it. And then for the Royal Tenenbaums, Ravel, I believe, was a basis of it. And maybe some other, and I think a few other French impressionistic composers. I don't think Debussy was part of it, but anyways. So the point is that like he started off with a very particular palette, but then Mothersbaugh encouraged him to broaden his palette a little bit. By the time you get to Life Aquatic, he started to introduce gradually some brass, and then it kind of perked his ears, and it was really interesting. So, in other words, I think if Wes Anderson is going to change, he's going to change very gradually. I think it takes him a while to warm up to certain things. So don't expect like this big, don't expect the next film to be like this big. I don't know what he would change into, to be honest, but I think he is capable of change. He's not going to change in the most dramatic way. And even if he doesn't, there is something about consistency. Consistency is not always a bad thing. It just has to be good. I think what it comes down to, if you're consistently good at something, then you want to, at all possible, to remain that way. I mean, like Ozu, for instance. I mean, he commented that not he commented on this, but others have noted that he tends to make the same kinds of films over and over again. And there is a certain uniformity, and like when you look at the titles of his films, you got Late Spring and Autumn Afternoon and Floating Weeds, and it's very, very simple and evocative. But the devil is all in the details. It's, well, on the one hand, there are consistencies in themes and styles, but it's in the little things. It's in the characters. It's how things go about. It's where you choose in your setting. And I think what's really interesting about what's also interesting about the Darjeeling Limited is that because India is used, it's yes, there is the Wes Andersonian universe. There's things that clearly look and feel like it's Wes Anderson's universe, but it's all done in India. So on the one hand, it a lot of times it complements what's already there, and also often it just uses the geography there. In that sense, it's also similar to Bottle Rocket in a certain respect, where there isn't that so much of that heavy hand as far as the production design was concerned. It's still there. I mean, it's very clear that Wes Anderson had a hand in shaping everything, but at the same time, he also felt inspired by what was already there. And also the mark of a really good director, and certainly anyone who ever works in film, is to know when to leave stuff alone. Know when to not touch anything or not to do anything else. If you see something that's good, you just leave it alone. You don't try to, oh, I got to do this one little thing. It's leaving things as is. And in that sense, it's really interesting to see that, that it shows that Wes Anderson is capable. He doesn't have to manipulate everything so much to fit his vision. And I see this also. I saw this also in Moonrise Kingdom, where yes, it's distinctly Wes Anderson, but at the same time, it's also true to its natural setting. In this case, it's right near Rhode Island. So again, I you wouldn't get that so much in Rushmore. Well, Rushmore, I think it has that to some extent. Royal Tenenbaums, I think, is probably the most. Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic is probably the most stylized, where it may take place in the real world, but it's certainly for the Royal Tenenbaums, it's Wes Anderson's New York. For The Life Aquatic, it's Wes Anderson's Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, or it's his water. And in a certain extent, the Darjeeling Limited is to some extent Wes Anderson's India, but at the same time, there's a balance between the two. It's not him imposing himself onto another country. It's letting the two fit together. There's more of a harmony. So no hipster cultural imperialism here. You can accuse it all you want, but I think it's baseless. But at any rate, so if you like Wes Anderson, you're gonna like the Darjeeling Limited. I still stand by that. Probably the best introduction to his work would be Rushmore, and then that's how I got into him. I guess Moonrise Kingdom is another good intro to it, but you really can't go wrong with Rushmore. Either that or the Royal Tenenbaums would be fine. But at the same time, I would say that there's something about this one that would also make it a good introduction to Wes Anderson. So, but I think if you're not used to that style, it may throw you off a bit, which is why I tend to recommend Rushmore as a good start, or even Bottle Rocket as a pretty good start. But yeah, the Darjeeling Limited. And until next time, take care.